You ready?
Rolling.
So this is a C3, I want to say. Oh, it's a G3. Yeah, it is an older model, isn't it? We're gonna be voicing this today. A lot of regulation. We'll do a lot of that. There's a little bit of got a soundboard crack there. And we've got another crack in the soundboard, but listening to it, it's not so bad that it's affecting the sustain of the tone. The bridge has a little crack, but again, it's not affecting the tuning there. And with the condition of everything being so like new, I think with this piano, just regular maintenance on it will keep it sounding really good for a long time. Really bright. When I play softly, sometimes it doesn't play because let off is so far away from the strings. Kind of a weird thing going on with this key. It kind of resets really slowly. I think it's probably friction in the hammer. When you're not pushing the pedal, you don't notice it because the weight of the damper is helping it reset, pushing it back down. But when you push the pedal, it takes that weight of those parts out of the equation, so it exposes any friction issues. I think that's in the hammer flanges. Probably just some cleaning and lubrication will knock that out. Even if we try and play soft, it's kind of difficult, right? There's a lot of friction right before the hammers hit the strings. That one's coming down slow too. So you have to play it kind of in a special way just to get those notes to speak. Yeah, so the biggest issues with these pianos is just that friction that we have, the let off being so far away, and then just the voicing. The hammers are just so hard that we're getting a really brash tone. You know, it's difficult to play a little bit, so let's break into it, see what we get. So the first thing I like to do usually on these is just clean things up, make sure everything's working smoothly. I'm guessing it was in a home with a swamp cooler at some point or somewhere with a lot of humidity for some reason. And that's why we've got the cracks on the soundboard. And then if you look at the action under here, it's kind of discolored. The wood is a little bit on these key buttons. I mean, and they feel rough, like they've seen a lot of moisture absorption from something. We've got mold, basically, mold spots, right? Yeah, and so these are really seized up, the hammer flanges here. They shouldn't be able to hang like that. And I don't think lubricating it is gonna do it. But just for test, I'll do one. Putting a lubricant on these joints, sometimes it's not a permanent thing. And we want a permanent thing here, if we can get it. That totally freed it up. We might start there, and then if we have to get more aggressive, repin everything. We'll lube them and see where we're at after we're done kind of cleaning. So you talk about a heavier touch. This will definitely be a lot lighter touch. Okay, we're gonna take it all apart and then we'll lubricate the other parts too. There we go. And we're going to undo the angled screws first, because those are like the lock screws. So you put them in last and you remove them first. We're going to vacuum off these keys. We're going to lubricate this. That'll work a lot better. Put some Lube 1725 on this, and then I'm also going to put some Pro-Tech on the key bushings. In between those two, it should be a lot smoother contact. These hammer flange screws might be loose, and sure enough, they are. The reason we tighten the screws is because it preserves the alignment that we put on the parts, and it also keeps anything from losing any energy in the playing of the piano in wobbly or any extra motion in those parts. Now we'll take a look at the repetitions or whippings. After I've already tightened the section, I'll go ahead and kind of realign things. I look at how that lines up with this yellow knuckle, like that. Take a look here and I'll move this one to the left. So I want to make sure this piano's in good regulation. And the first thing we want to look at is the foundation here, how well the key frame is bedded to the key bed. I get a knock when I get on here. That's because it's not bedded firmly all the way across right here. So we're losing energy. Well, it doesn't sound like we're losing energy because the piano's really bright and powerful, but when I flex down on this, the keys go down and you hear a knock. And the end is floating. The keys are moving. My first step is to raise these all. I suspect that when we're done here, the key dip will be very, very shallow. The keys won't go down very far. So everything's floating now. So here's my end one. They have a different pitch to them a little bit too. See, they all have a different sound, so you kind of know that you're not just hearing the same one that was back there. So that's exactly where we want to go. Now watch, if I try and play the piano. Wobbling hammer there. So now I'm going to, these are all not touching the wood. I'm going to lower them. I'm going to push the pedals to, because that will suck this bed down a little bit, and then I'm going to just lower it just to where I don't hear the knock. There, not knocking when I lift up on this pin. So now, no knock, no knock, no knock. There, now it's all bedded. Now at least that hammer's not wobbling. But I can feel the keys are pretty shallow. If I use my gauge here, I'll compare two keys that are fairly level with each other. Look, it's sticking above that key. Probably an appropriate depth for these would be further, more like when it looks like that. And so we're still really shallow in how far the keys are going down. We can either add spacers under here and raise these individually, or wholesale raise them, and I'm going to raise them wholesale. Do the same amount of trim on each one. So the overall feel to me is still too shallow, but we're getting closer. So we could either raise the keys, and then they'll have more space to go down, as you can see down here, or we can remove a spacer, cardboard spacer out of the front, and allow it to go down further, just to see how everything comes together. We'll use as our test. I like this D and the E because the two keys the height is really level between them, so it's easy to check. So I'm just going to try on this E. Just really going to make sure that pops up as I release the key here. If it does, there's plenty of strength there. Just need to see where this jack lines up with the knuckle. I'm going to adjust the height of this hammer so that it starts the right distance from the strings. If the hammer's further away from the string, you can potentially get a louder, more powerful sound because you have longer to accelerate the hammer before it hits the string. So I'm raising this capstan screw to raise that up. But it also, can have a meatier, heavier feel. If it's closer to the string, you can repeat faster, but you don't have as much power. Now there's a point here where the hammer is going to drop away from the string. We want that to be about 2 millimeters from the string. I'm pushing the key still, but it escapes. I'm going to push the key down until I feel resistance and then push quickly. And I should be able to get the note to speak, but if I do that same thing slowly, it shouldn't speak. Now one of the issues in this piano where it wouldn't play, it was hard to play softly, is look at this hammer here. It's quite a distance from the string. It's a lot more than 2 millimeters. And so if you play really quietly, it's not enough energy to actually hit the string and make that note. So I get to this resistance here and I push through. I barely hear it if at all. It's not as good as this.
Yeah.
And then what I want to do, I want to have a little bit of follow through after I reach this point of resistance and the hammer escapes. There needs to be a little bit of the keystroke left for follow through, like swinging a golf club or a baseball bat. I've got some follow through here, but it's just not quite enough, I'm thinking. There's also an adjustment I'm going to do here, how far the hammer drops down after it reaches its height. I'm going to minimize that distance. I'll just make the action feel a lot cleaner to me. Not so clunky. That adjustment's called drop, because the hammer drops. So that would work. If I regulated it just like that, that would work. The problem is these keys aren't perfectly level. Let's level them. I use a system that props up note number 1 and 88 with an adjustable block. I put both blocks in and measure the height from the key bed to the underside lip of the key. Then I can suspend my key leveling stick across the whole keyboard and examine closely what needs to be adjusted. Now sometimes the keys are askew and need to be squared before they can be effectively leveled. That can be done by bending the balance rail pin, as I just did with the screwdriver there a second ago. Now I'm going to take paper punchings of different thicknesses and place them under the correct keys to level out the keyboard. So the thickness of 2, if it fits under there without pushing the key down, then it'll probably accept that color. This has to be done carefully if you don't take the stack off. You cut a double wide slit in the paper, and then with tweezers or forceps, you can insert it onto the pin underneath the cloth punchings. When you do this, it raises the hammer line, so be prepared to continue regulating after this process. I'm going to tap down right here to seat those, because that paper compacts a little bit. This key's a little high still. You can see it moving just slightly. I'm going to push down at the balance rail pretty firmly, and it compresses the new paper punching. Then at the end, I'll examine from both ends visually without the stick to confirm that the keys are level. So all we've done really is clean things, lubricate things so far, freed up the hammer flange joints because they were stuck, and then we leveled the keys, which actually, bedded the key frame, brought the key height up, leveled it, and the sharps, and just even that, because there's more key travel and a firmer foundation, just that actually already is changing the sound, I think, a little bit. I don't know if it's imagined, but I don't think so. I think the biggest factor is that you control it differently now. And so it's going to sound, you can make it sound different. Dynamic range, just adjusting that, just how far the keys went down, and also just the fluidity of the moving parts. There's no excess friction getting in the way. So I haven't adjusted let off yet, but I can already play quieter and have it work, not misfire. Interesting. This shows me how good a job they did setting the dip, because all we did was level the keys, and now the dip seems really, really uniform. Yeah, and I'm actually really liking the way it's feeling playing. So at this point, I actually want to set the spring strength of these. Some of these are just acting a little strong now that we've lubricated these. The spring just kicks up a little bit strong, so I'm going to tone that down a little bit by bending this spring here. I'll show you on the side. You just take this out, and I can either bend this up or down, and that changes the strength of it. I want it to come up strong, but not be bouncy like that. And that's maybe a little bouncy, so I'm going to tone that down a bit like that. I like that. So this we call setting the checking. This part here is called a back check. After you play the note, around mezzo forte or so, the hammer bounces off the string and bounces down. Now, if there was nothing to catch it, it would just keep bouncing. It might bounce more than once against the string when you don't want it to. So they have this back check to keep the hammer in check. And so I want to set how far from the strings that checks, and it'll make for a similar touch across the whole piano. To make this adjustment, I'm bending a wire that the back check is mounted on, and it's inserted into the back of the key, So I'm just pushing or pulling and it bends that wire. Now I want to make sure all these jacks will return well under the hammers, because there were some that I felt that weren't returning well when I released the key, so it wouldn't repeat. So I just pull the jack out slightly and it should slip right back under there. Okay, so we just set the jack positions. It's feeling so much better already. We're going to go ahead and set the distance of the hammers to the strings. So I just pinch that gauge in the strings, and underneath here I can look through and often see how high the hammer is through there. I like to set several samples because the height of the strings above the action, it's not a straight line. So got the end of the section in an E here. So I like to go right in the middle of those and set that one to a straight line in between them. Then I go in between that. Just tiny adjustments make a difference up here. Good. Now we want to set the lead off just a little bit closer and make sure it's uniform. So I'm going to go ahead and set lead off now. Mostly by touch and hearing am I going to set this. This will also make the tone a little bit brighter and more intense, which I don't want with this piano. There's plenty of intensity in the sound. But then I'll just have to needle the hammers accordingly. So this is just a combination of me coming to this, what I call the, the escapement shelf or let off shelf, and just pushing either, a fast and a slow, or a harder and a softer, and just going back and forth between those two, pinpointing using my ear how close the hammer is to the string. So now that I set let off in these two sections, it feels shallower. So it kind of creates the feeling of being shallower because there's less follow through after the hammers hit the string. The amount of keystroke that's left is a lot smaller. And I think we'll probably just adjust that wholesale with the key bedding. So now it's like 395,000, 395,000, so 400-ish. That's kind of where we're sitting now. So not much, but it makes a big difference. You can feel like you can kind of sink into the keys there. You have more choices how you're going to play that note, whereas before it's just like, dunk, you're there. So we have to set drop. It's the last thing. Now that the let off is set to the right height, it changes how far it looks like it drops. So we gotta set drop now. Now the regulation's good. Really good. We have a lot more control over the tone. Let me play that same. I couldn't do that before, right? I couldn't even get close to that. But now we're going to work on the tone, optimize it, and we're going to make sure that the hammers hit all strings of the note simultaneously. I'm listening to it stop the sound of the string at the same time. So all these are good so far. But that one, the left is short and the right rings. Shows me the left string is making contact first. So I need to file the hammer on that left side so that they'll hit at the same time. So the left two are short and the right is singing, so I need to file the left two. room still, but now we have a lot more control. So now we're gonna needle it and bring it down where we want. Too much. It needs a little bit of give, it needs a little cushion to sound sweeter. And when you get crescendo, it broadens, but it doesn't get piercing. Fix that later. So you got to kind of rein it in a little bit to where the piano can come down very easily. And then you have a bigger contrast. It just sounds too chunky, like woody. That's more balanced. From being kind of like a shapeless, just, you know, woody kind of knocky tone to having like a shape to it, you know. G blocks in here, so it's shifting. So we're gonna make it so it doesn't shift so far over. Try and hit a good spot to where there's a good tonal contrast. And good contrast, right? Yeah. these are allowed to come up. This is underneath the dampers here that lifts the dampers. And these are allowed to come up and hit that sostenuto rod. Now there is a rail back here to stop that from happening. That needs to be adjusted low enough so it doesn't hit so much here. The felt stops them. Basically, there's some screws in here. I'll just loosen them. Drop that rail down a little bit. I'm sure there's lots of you out there that have the same thing going on with your pianos and you don't know what it is. But that's what it is. I can push this down just a little bit in this area and then tighten there. There. While we're down here, let's check the pedal adjustment. We're going to drop that down a little bit. That might actually help our staccato notes. I was noticing we couldn't play staccato very well. There's a couple different reasons, but this is one of them. I'm hopeful that this will drastically improve that. Sostenuto works, catches all of them. It doesn't catch any when it goes, but it is going up too far. You hear that? The metal right here is allowed to click. So raise the pedal nut on that one too a little bit. Now when I release it, it doesn't clank like that, see? But it still catches them. It still keeps them from going above. So that's great. It still has brightness to it for sure, right? If you play right, it'll be bright.